Jajabor, my buddy. Hey, long time no broadcast. I owe you 1,000, 10,000 apologies, maybe more, for I owe you responses on those vids. I kind of broke off in July. I got involved in tons of stuff and then a lot of community activities, and just I haven't made any vids too. So my apologies, man, and I will respond to those because the dialogue. I love that dialogue. And I've got some extra time tonight, and bingo today appears on my screen. Atheism and what did you call your video? This is a response to it. In any event, atheism and well, I'd have to pause this anyway. The one about the soul, where you ask basic questions when we go through, I guess, physiological changes. What is happening to our soul? Some ideas. I read a great book that raises the same sort of implications by a neurologist, Oliver Sacks. The wife is called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. That's the name of the book. Great book. He goes through various forms of neurological abnormalities, I guess you'd say, and he describes case histories and stories of people who have gone through these. Everything from people who woke up and believe that they were dogs, to people who have had certain parts of the certain connective tissue in the brain cut and how it changed their perception. Interesting part about the book too. He talks about the medical model, Western medical model, viewing every difference as a deficit, and he says that some conditions are actually exuberances. He classes, I think, epilepsy as an exuberance rather than a deficit. And actually, this was the book I was reading when I went down and saw a little footnote, and at the bottom I read that temporal lobe epilepsy is often accompanied by a intense sensation of deja vu and olfactory hallucinations. And it's actually when I diagnosed myself as having epilepsy. I'd been having symptoms like this for years, and I didn't know. So it's a fascinating book, and I find it really interesting. But he raises this implication in these various altered states. What does that mean about the human soul? You had mentioned that maybe we have the body, the mind, and the soul connected, or are they disconnected? You were saying when someone does go through these changes, when their personalities change, or after an injury, say a brain trauma, and their personality changes, what does that mean for the soul? What happens to the man who existed before? And in a way, I think of it as just a question of, kind of a question about change in itself, whether it's a change of an injury, but just change in the world. I mean, what happened to the earth that was here yesterday, or the earth that was here 1,000 years ago? Does it really exist somewhere? Does each moment in time exist somewhere? Or is it just one universe that is changing, that there is no leaving behind of other worlds, but it's just in a constant state of evolutionary, one world in a state of evolutionary change, just changing, and that when our minds try to separate it off and say, well, where was the world? Where was the earth that existed, 10 years ago on this particular day? That we're actually somehow projecting our imaginations correctly into time. We're just freezing something. Well, maybe that's an effective memory, which you mentioned. In any event, if it were true that for every single moment, I mean, if we could even cut things up into moments, because I don't think time is really that divisible. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe there's a fabric to time and it's divisible. But if it is truly continuous, I don't know if we can really have each separate moments of Earth. And then if we're talking about the soul, we would have to be just like we would be spinning off Earths every single moment if time could be divided that way, which I think is an illusion. But would we have different souls spinning off, at every single moment, so that we actually had a infinite number of our own past souls? Then what would there be to judge if souls are judged? We have a lot of words. We have words like personality, words like character, words like psyche, words like soul, which kind of overlap in a sense. Soul's a little different. And if indeed there is a soul, if it exists. I mean, I know my psyche exists. I use that usually for my mind as well as my emotions and certain symbolic processes that go on. I think if putting aside the concept of soul for a moment, all the other stuff, personality, character, etc., 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 I think can be subsumed under the word psyche. That's kind of how I use the word. The soul is another matter. Sometimes I think soul is a romantic notion. I mean, if it doesn't exist, it's a beautiful romantic notion. But we do speak of it as though we know that it exists, because we talk about it deepening through suffering. Oh, by the way, when it comes to memory, I think there are two memory systems. There's the memory system that is located in the neurons, and there's also the limbic memory system, which maybe stores more emotion, but I don't know. I talked to a neurologist about that once. He was on drugs at the time, recovering from a back injury in the hospital. I was visiting him, and he went off on this, a separate set of memories, emotional memories that are part of the limbic system, but I don't know if that's really his neurological knowledge right at the time, whether he was just sort of hallucinating. Where did that man go? Nice guy, anyway. So in any event, if the soul exists, and if it is sort of integrated, I don't know how it could be totally separated, right? I mean, how could you have three completely separated spheres? Because we are, whatever we are, we appear to be integrated, or at least coordinated beings. Well, we could be just coordinated, but I think there's an integration. Now that you've brought up the mind-body-soul dilemma, usually talk about the mind-body dilemma, mind-body-soul dilemma. Okay, so the soul, if it exists, which I'm willing to assume, right? Perhaps it is constituted out of the precipitated moral qualities. Perhaps it's moral as opposed to intellectual. So we go through all our ramifications and our calculations and our experiences, and yet the moral residue is what it would be deposited in our soul. Now, how that relates to our character, I'm not sure, but maybe the character is a service of the soul. I don't know. But in any event, if it's indeed the moral residue, then in a way we can salvage it that way. You can go through, say, through a head trauma, a brain trauma. I don't know. I don't know if there are cases where people go through brain trauma and then they suffer a moral change. They maybe suffer a functional change. I know people suffer a functional change, a personality change. But there could be many, personalities. You could have the same set of, the same sort of moral integrity. So I'm wondering if we want to define the soul in completely moral terms. I don't know if that matches with the physiology. I'd have to see case histories to see. I don't know if somebody's had a brain injury and suddenly become a horrible, vicious criminal or a murderer or something. Maybe so. If that's true, then again, it's a big. Once again, we're back to the same terrible dilemma, and we haven't managed to salvage the soul from the question that you ask. Salvage it from the question that you ask. I don't know. Of course, I don't know anything. I just talk out loud and think of my feet, as they say. My feet, think. I got a couple minutes left, so where will I go with this? So yes. So anyway, what happened to the man who was here yesterday is kind of like, I think, asking what happened to the world as it was yesterday. So if it's true that we are actually, there is just one of us that is in a constant state of evolution, your question becomes all the more poignant. What happens then if there is a brain trauma, and if the person's personality changes, okay, but if their moral integrity changes and they become less moral, yes, what does that mean for the soul? And if there is a judgment day and the soul is to be judged, is it judged based on before the injury or after the injury? Or is it divided in two and sent to two different realms? I don't know. In any event, the case histories would be really interesting to look at. It would shed some light on the question. I don't know if, maybe I've sort of pointed to a few possible directions that might lead to some sort of solution. But it's an excellent question, man. I really thank you for asking that. It's a fascinating question, and it will engage my mind incessantly. It's been great talking to you. I'm sorry I have been incommunicato for so long. You take care, and keep asking those questions, man. They're great. Talk to you soon. Jaja. Bye-bye.